Cheers, thank you for that introduction. I'm Jordan, I'm here to talk about Cloudflare, how it can help you ship fast, scale faster, and has unbeatable pricing. It's also one of the greenest cloud providers as well. So, as a solo engineer and having worked in small teams, I need certain things from a cloud provider, and I'm sure you do too. I need to be able to handle spiky requests, like this one from my app, changing hourly, daily. I never know when a spike's going to come. I don't want to get involved with that, I don't have the time. I don't want to pay for more than I need. Every single penny matters. Ideally, I want to pay for what I use. I also live and die by app reviews and what my customers think, so I need to be able to help them quickly. Shipping fixes in minutes, features in days. Similarly, I need great performance and reliability so that my customers have a great experience. I need this because I run Pimsicle, my own company, since June last year, where I'm a solo founder, engineer, all of the hats, some job title here. I do Shopify apps for operational things, so warehousing, stock takes, staff discounts, and retail operations. And my services alone are handling about 2 million requests per month by myself. And that's how I found Cloudflare, and why I think you should try it out too. Also, I'm not sponsored by them, I just really love the platform, I'm just a big fan. But first, a little bit of audience participation. So, who's Azure? Several things on Azure? Okay, a few people. Google Cloud? Okay, I know we've got Google Cloud fans in the room. All right, AWS? Okay, yeah, everyone. Cloudflare? Probably as a CDN, something like that, yeah? Okay. What about Cloudflare Workers, their cloud platform? Okay, a couple of hands, good. Hopefully there'll be a few more who want to try it after this. So Cloudflare Workers is their cloud platform that's expanded rapidly over the last few years. Cloudflare is more than a CDN now. It has workers, which are serverless functions, think Lambda-esque. It's got R2, which is blob storage, which also has an S3 compatible API and no egress fees. It has a serverless SQLite database called D1. It's got queues for asynchronous processing, workflows for multi-step execution, durable objects for coordinating multiple clients and managing WebSockets with private transactional storage attached. Of course, it's got a low latency key value store. And we're doing a tech talk in 2025, so of course we've got to talk about AI and how you can run machine learning models with serverless GPUs. We're going to talk about a couple of the features here. So we're going to talk about workers first, because this is what their entire platform is built on. It's a Lambda-esque. It can process HTTP requests, cron requests, and queue requests. It's built on top of the V8 engine using isolates, so you get great performance, and this sandboxes your code as well, so they're also highly secure. This means that there are no cold start times with these serverless functions. Not only that, but they're distributed across Cloudflare's network, so they also mean that they're closer to your users, and so there's low latency. There's no region to pick when you're deploying these things. They're built on browser standards, so they use request and responses that the browser understands, so there's no custom versioning or mutations that you need to figure out. They're all built on top of these platform standards that we all know. So let's look at some examples. On the left here, you can see an example of a queue handler. We declare a queue handler. That gets a batch of messages. This is something Cloudflare defined. And then you get an end parameter. This is your environment variables. This is also your services that are bound to it. And then you can loop over that batch of messages, process them how you need to, and either manually acknowledge them or allow the function to run to completion, and then it'll be auto-acknowledged. You can see how simple this is. Similarly, on the other side, we've got an example of handling a HTTP request. And again, you see we get the request parameter. This is the same request if you create one in a browser. And again, the end parameter. We do a little bit of routing here and return either some API data, which is JSON, or we can return some HTML. Again, you can see there's no dependencies here. This is all just browser standard stuff in JavaScript. Each worker gets its own domain as well, so you can either route inside of a worker like this, or you can do routing between different workers as well. So you might be asking how this is configured, because there's always some config, right? So this is configured via a TOML file on our JSON file. This is a real example for one of my services. So we give it a name. We've got some compatibility flags for ensuring node compatibility. I'm using TypeScript because types, and so we point it to where those live. I don't want a worker's dev URL because this is a back-end service that's consuming from a queue. Smart placement enables you to really easily and effectively place your workers nearest to your queues or databases so that they're optimized for that kind of performance. You want persisted logs and observability? Well, that's enabled just by a Boolean flag. And we've got some options at the bottom here for how we consume from a queue. All you need to do is run one command with Cloudflare, and that's deployed, and your worker's going and consuming from a queue. There's no Terraform, no Ansible, no CDK, nothing else to learn. And in my situation as a solo engineer, and I'm sure in most businesses, we need to be really mindful of pricing. Now, serverless is normally very competitive. I'm sure we all know that. But Cloudflare's is pretty incredible. So there's a free plan for workers. You get 100,000 requests a day, each of which can be a maximum of 10 milliseconds of CPU time. Now, the CPU time also is only while your services are doing things and active. If you send a HTTP request to something else in your worker, and that's waiting, you don't pay for that time either, which can have a huge impact on your pricing, depending what your model's like. And again, there's a workers' paid plan, which is $5 a month. And for that, you get 10 million requests included a month and 30 million milliseconds of CPU time, which is pretty incredible. We'll also be talking about this workers' paid plan later, as you get other services involved with that as well. You can also serve static assets as well. So if you're hosting a website using workers, you can host the static assets from Cloudflare, and that's free. So you can see it's already great pricing. But it's not all wonderful. There are some limits. So as we mentioned before, for the free plan, you've got a maximum of 10 milliseconds of CPU time for your worker to do something, not a lot of time. For the paid plan, you get 30 seconds of CPU time for HTTP requests and up to 15 minutes for QR cron. But again, this is active CPU time while your functions are doing things, so it's not really comparable to what you might see in some other cloud providers. At the time of writing this talk, the no compatibility is about 90% if you use those compatibility flags, so they might not be able to use the SDKs that you want, but you can always make API calls to these third-party services. It's been very refreshing to not always npm install everything and just be able to make some fetch requests. Language support, of course, is first class for JavaScript, Python, and Rust. If you want to do other languages, Cloudflare supports them by compiling them down to WebAssembly or WASM, and so you can deploy that. And observability is an improving picture. You can now have persisted logs. There are third parties that support Cloudflare workers, but it is getting better over time. Here's an example of what the persisted logs look like at the moment for one of my services. I've just touched the tip of the iceberg with workers, as I want to cover off some of the other things that we can do with it. But there's just a little bit to whet your appetite for more. This command at the top, you can see, that's all you need with the config and that 15 lines of code to deploy your worker immediately, have that active around Cloudflare's global network, and start accepting requests. There's CLI, which helps you generate via templates, deploy this, generate TypeScript types as well if you're using those, and more. Local development is supported. You can run most of Cloudflare services on your machine. No more fighting local stack or trying to figure that out. Standard deployments models, of course, supported, so gradual deployments, CI/CD. You can even run your CI/CD pipeline on workers if you want. You get preview URLs for different deployments. So you can see an example of this here. So you can easily QA and see your changes live if you're using a website. If you're into monorepos, they're supported as well. And there's Cloudflare Pages, which helps you more easily deploy complex web applications and frameworks. So next up, we're going to talk about another different service. But first, so who's used AWS Lambda with an RDS database? Okay. How long did that take you the first time you did it? A while? A little tricky? VPCs and fun? Well, this is where D1 comes in. Cloudflare's serverless SQLite database. It's completely managed by Cloudflare. There aren't any cold starts or spin-up times when we talk serverless either. It's got a SQLite syntax, built-in disaster recovery. It's designed for horizontal scaling. Each database can be a maximum of 10 gig. You might want to split this per user or per tenant. You don't pay for how long it's up. You only pay for storage and the queries that you're running. It couldn't be easier to get a database up and going. So we use Wrangler again, the CLI command. We can easily create a database with that first line. That database is immediately available, no waiting. Then we can run some migrations to set up our tables and what we want it to look like. And then we can easily execute commands, either from the CLI, workers, or via HTTP API. And of course, we're going to talk pricing. So there's a free tier with 5 million row reads a day and 100,000 writes and a maximum size of 5 gig. Or again, with the paid plan, that's again $5 a month, you get 25 billion row reads, 50 million writes, and up to 5 gig. So again, we're only paying for queries and storage, what you're using here. You're not paying for just the hours that it's up or what you're using it for. Now, we talked about migrations. Well, it's just a SQL file. We all know, and well, maybe not love, but we all know this certainly. And we can migrate quite easily. So that's what that looks like. Now you might be asking, what environment variables do I need to set? Do I need to set some passwords and manage that with Secrets Manager and things? Well, none is the answer. You bind in that config toml file that we talked about here, so you specify the name and the ID. Cloudflare does the rest. Connecting to a database hasn't ever been this easy. So what does it actually look like in code? Well, here's an example of me inserting into a database. Here's the env parameter that we saw earlier. We access the DB that we bound to, and then we can run some methods on there. So we prepare a SQL statement. We then run that SQL statement and get the results. What's great here is that TypeScript gives us the ability to see these types, and Cloudflare generate the types for us. So env actually reflects your infrastructure. If you've got database accessible on there, you can use that and know what methods are available on it. You can know what is on your infrastructure and what's available. There's no more guessing involved. Also, ORMs are supported for D1 as well, if you're into that kind of thing. And here's how we can simply get data out. Again, preparing the SQL statement, executing it, and getting the results as a list. Now, I know what you're thinking. This all looks fairly simple and straightforward, but performance is probably weedy, right? Well, this is an example that I took the other day from one of my apps. So our 99th percentile here for query latency is 11 milliseconds. That's across 1.2 million queries, and with millions of rows read and written. Pretty great. So we've talked about a lot in the earlier talks about asynchronous processing. So how many people are doing async processing with queues and event-driven? Awesome, great, good audience. Well, here's where queues comes in from Cloudflare. It gives you pretty much what you would expect from a queue provider in 2025. So yeah, you get managed queues with guaranteed delivery. There's no egress fees. It gives batching, retries, delaying messages, dead letter queues, and push and pull consumers. Now, of course, it's not quite as good as SQS, to be honest. Dead letter replays aren't there, and observability is not the same, but it's definitely improving. And the Cloudflare team are iterating really quickly on these things as well. It's hopefully as simple as you would expect by now. We can easily create a queue with Wrangler. We can then bind to it in our config file in the middle, and then we can simply send a message. Again, everything being typed all the way through. Now you know what's coming next. It's incredibly competitively priced. It's not free tier available, but there is a workers' pay plan, so you get 1 million operations a month. An operation counts as 64 kilobits of data that's written, read, or deleted. And again, you can figure out your bill using this formula, so you don't need a whole team of mathematicians. So let's look through an example. When you want to consume, how do you do it? So we looked at this file before. The bottom bit is the part that we're interested in under this consumers. You define the queue. You can optionally define the batch size, retries, and concurrency that you want for your consumer. And you can specify a dead letter queue, and the dead letter queue will automatically be created for you as soon as any messages need to go to it. And that's it. Your worker will start consuming those messages from the queue as soon as you deploy that. And again, there's the handler that we talked about earlier. You get a batch of messages, and you can process through those and either manually acknowledge them or allow it to run to completion. It's incredibly simple how you can consume from these queues this way. So we've talked about some of the core building blocks of an application. But what about if we need some more complex logic? Who loves Amazon States language and step functions? Ooh, just one. Wow, so many questions. Well, this is where Cloudflare workflows come in. Think of them as step function-like. They're durable, multi-step execution engine. There's no custom language involved. We all know that serverless functions have limits, and we need to be aware of them when we're doing compute. 15 minutes in the case of Cloudflare workers isn't always enough. You know, there might be lots of data, complex business logic, or timings that we need to wait for. Well, workflows is here to help. You can run multiple steps in a workflow, each of which is persisted, each of which is retriable. They're defined just in JavaScript. There's no custom language to learn. They're currently in beta, but they're rapidly moving towards production. You can wait for any time period you want. So if you need to wait for minutes, hours, days, or even weeks, you can do all of that in there as well. And again, you're only charged on active CPU time, so you're not paying for waiting. Here's an example of how we can trigger one. We can simply create one, pass in some parameters and an ID if we want. You can get it back at any time and get the status of it by using that similar method. And again, if you want to reference it later, you can leverage its ID to get it back and check on that at a later state if you want to. Let's look through what one actually looks like. Here's an example of one of my actual workflows. I'm sure that's not very readable at the back, so let's break it down. The first, you can see that it's class-based JavaScript. We extend Cloudflare's own workers entry point class with our own class name. We then get this run method, which has our event, which is the parameters that triggered the workflow, and we get the step variable, which is what Cloudflare provide, which gives us some methods. Now again, this is all typed, as you can see. So we know what the event is that we're getting passed in, we know what steps are available, we have all the types all the way through, so we know what we're doing and working with. Continuing on, we then get access to the data, so pulling out an email and a store ID that I passed in. We'll then sleep for 2 minutes. You can see here also you name each individual step, the same kind of thing you will be used to in step functions, so you know what step is which. And then we'll do some actions. So we'll send an email, sending a welcome email that you get when you're on board with an app, that kind of thing. We'll then wait a day till it gives the user a chance to get started. What we'll then do is check to see if they've actually used our application. So here, the has scanned items is where we're checking our database to see if the user's used our application, and then we're returning a Boolean. But you can see here I've also customized the retries, so you can control each step and how they're retried. So if you've got a service that you know is going to be a bit flaky, or a third party that you don't fully trust, you can add some more retries, increasing the limit, the delays, and how that works. Similarly, you control your steps with the timeout, and then you can return that data and use that later on in either more steps or in your workflow. And then we'll wait 5 days to see if the user's uninstalled, and so on. What does that actually look like from a dashboard point of view if we're trying to debug this? Well, this is, again, a real example. So you can see each individual step matches the step names that we talked about. You can see the duration of each as well. You can see the configs that each step ran with. And if you're returning data from it, that's available as well. So it makes debugging really nice because you can go in and see exactly what's happened and exactly what's triggered your step function as well. So up next, who has managed and scaled a WebSocket server? Okay, couple people. How much fun? Lots? No? Shaking here? Yeah, I bet there's some more stories there. So we've covered off building a traditional application, but there's always something new, right? We want to build something like a chat app, manage WebSockets, or something else. Well, this is where durable objects come in, for coordinating multiple clients with private transactional storage attached to these as well. I don't know how to really describe these. Coming up with a description was really hard. The way I want to describe it, somewhere Cloudflare got really carried away. It's going to blow your mind what you can build with durable objects. You want to build a chat app? Yeah, it can do that. You want to send WebSockets and scale that to many, many messages and clients? Yeah, you got that as well. Want to create a database per user? Got it covered. It's incredibly powerful. Someone's described it as a new paradigm, which is a bit of a stretch, but it's pretty incredible what you can build with it. It has its own key value storage attached by default, but you can also create a SQLite database, the same kind of database as D1 that we were talking about earlier. You can also leverage Cloudflare's own products in it, so if you want to send to queues or use R2 or any of those other services, then you can do that as well. If you need to do something on a time interval, it can do that as well. Now we'll look to a quick example. So here you can see I'm calling my thing a notification server because I'm using it to push out WebSocket notifications. We generate an ID from a name, so it's easily retrievable. We then get that example. That will either get you a stub if it doesn't already exist, or if it already exists, it will get you the durable object that was created. We can then start calling methods on it. So in this case, I'm going to call fetch and pass a request into it. And at some later time, I'm going to broadcast an update to it, in this case, sending out the number 10. Here's what the actual durable object looks like, again, class-based. I'm calling my notification server. What we're doing here is when a request comes in, we're accepting the WebSocket. Now, the accept WebSocket request is one of Cloudflare's methods. It's built on top of the workers WebSockets API and web standards. So this gives you a hibernatable WebSocket. No need to keep that server online 24/7 anymore. No need to worry about that connection because it can be hibernated and reconnected. And also, it takes away polling. So I replaced a load of polling for my apps using these WebSockets. We then got a couple of methods here just for handling the WebSockets errors or any connections closed and any messages. But you can see how simple that is. In 20 lines of code, we're accepting and creating hibernatable WebSockets already. And then at a later date, we want to call another method and send out our update to our WebSocket listeners. So again, we pass in an account, we create a message that we want to send out. We use Cloudflare's methods to get the WebSockets. That will retrieve them from the durable object. And it will send a message to each of the clients. Of course, handling in case any have disconnected or closed. So around 50 lines of code, we have a WebSocket server that can scale and send out messages to as many clients as you'd like. You're not paying for it while it's not working either, because things can be hibernated. And with a couple of lines of code, you've got an incredibly scalable application. So hopefully I've highlighted some of the really powerful tools that Cloudflare has. There's obviously lots more, but just to give you a taster. So let me show you an example of what an actual architecture looks like. This is actually what one of my own apps looks like. Mine is a Preact app served by Cloudflare Pages. Cloudflare Pages, again, is a wrapper around workers that lets you more easily deploy web frameworks and things. You can also do the same with workers. There are a couple of trade-offs, so just something to be mindful of if you're making that debate. That API calls D1, which is my database. It also calls durable objects to start coordinating those notifications. I also drop a load of messages onto queues, of course, which are processed by a worker in the background. That calls a third party for email sending, for example. You can see how quite fairly straightforward this is. But of course, Cloudflare offers a lot more. So let's do the kitchen sink edit. Here you can see Cloudflare's own reference architecture. Again, we've got a client, a website, an app, whatever it may be. You've got that protected behind Cloudflare's DDoS protection, its WAF, its bot management. You can then serve requests and websites from Cloudflare Pages, Workers AI, of course, if you're doing AI and LLM things. Of course, we've got Cloudflare CDN available. You can serve content up from R2. If you're serving content from R2, you don't pay for egress as well, so you could dramatically reduce your cloud bill. You can serve optimized images from Cloudflare's image product. So if you want to serve different scale images on different devices, laptops, mobiles, then it can do that for you. You've got Cloudflare Stream as well for videos, doing the same thing. Of course, you've got multiple data products, so D1 that we talked about, durable objects, key value, and of course, vector database, because AI. And you can see all the different tooling that Cloudflare supports. So you can use Wrangler like I demonstrated, but if you want to use Terraform, it supports Terraform as well. You can use other third-party logging and monitoring providing. Cloudflare's is getting better, but you might want to look at a third party. Datadog and Honeycomb are some examples. And so hopefully you can see there's a lot more to Cloudflare now than just a CDN. So after all that, who's now trying Cloudflare? Great. Thank you. Thank you. I've been Jordan. I'm Jordan Finners on pretty much everything. Thank you for coming.